Welcome to this training series on holistic security for activists. Over the coming sessions, we will explore how to protect ourselves and our movements, not only physically, but also digitally, emotionally, and collectively. This space is designed to share tools, reflect on risks, and strengthen resilience so we can continue our activism with greater care and sustainability. Let's kick off this first session by exploring the concept of holistic security and what it actually means. But before we dive right into the topic, I want you to take a brief moment and reflect on what safety means to you. What do you need to have in order to feel safe? It might be people, it might be materials, it might be routines. Go ahead and pause the video to take a minute and think about it. Many advocates and activists often have to navigate environments where our safety and security can be at risk. Feeling safe and secure is crucial for our well being and the effectiveness of our work. In this context, we often talk about security or safety, and these terms are often used interchangeably, but they don't mean the same. Security refers to the freedom from risk or harm resulting from violence or intentional acts from external actors. So, for example, you're using an encrypted messaging app like Signal for confidential communication to protect your digital security, or you're avoiding to go through a not well lit road in the middle of the night to avoid getting mugged. On the other hand, safety refers to the freedom from risk or harm as a result of unintentional acts, so accidents, natural disasters, or illnesses, for example. It encompasses a broader range of preventative measures to avoid accidents, harm, or injury in any type of setting. So, think about, for example, the safety briefing in an airplane or wearing an FFP2 mask during the COVID-19 pandemic to protect yourself, or any type of protocols that we have on how to deal with environmental disasters. It's very important that we find measures of protection for both safety and security. Most importantly, though, what we want to do, we want to foster an environment where people take their security seriously and feel safe enough to talk about it with each other. But let's talk about why we actually need to talk about safety and security. All of us desire and need a sense of security, the feeling that we are protected from harm. When we feel safe, we can relax, we can calm our minds and rest. If we are unable to feel safe for extended periods, it is possible for us to quickly become tired, miserable, and even physically ill. Thinking in general just becomes difficult. As activists, we often choose to sacrifice our sense of safety, at least temporarily, in the pursuit of a better society free from oppression and exploitation. Our safety and security are interconnected to historical, structural, systemic, and political oppression and injustice that we have been subjected to through the state, through non state actors, through gender biases, institutions, and other mediums. Since some of us have been disproportionately impacted, it is evident that security is a deeply personal, subjective, and gendered concept, and therefore looks different for all social justice activists. In order to fill the inevitable need to keep our movements and ourselves thriving, we need to create a safety net, which includes tools and tactics from holistic safety and security approaches. The goal is not to be safe through doing nothing, but to consciously face threats and protect ourselves and our communities as much as possible so that we can still be engaged and active. This enables safety and security practices to become a tool for self empowerment. Unfortunately, in our work as social justice activists and human rights defenders, we are occasionally confronted by others who will try to prevent us from achieving our goals by using intimidation, harassment, or even violence. Let's look at the current global threat landscape to further explore and understand why holistic security is essential for activists and human rights defenders. Unfortunately, global trends show the continuous rise of attacks against human rights defenders and social justice activists. The global analysis for 24-25 by Frontline Defenders speaks urgently. At least 324 human rights defenders were killed in 32 countries in 2024 alone. 88% of the recorded killings globally happen in Latin America. Around 92% of environmental defenders experience online harassment. A report by the United Nations Human Rights Office on killed civilians states that just over 500 of those killed in 2024 were human rights defenders. There are different reports with different numbers, and the exact numbers are never really available due to inaccessibility of support networks in rural areas, or also the fact that some things are just not recorded or reported at all. There are trends towards sophisticated multi-vector campaigns that combine state surveillance capabilities with private sector tools and non-state actor networks. Most of the reported violence against human rights defenders are threats and other harassment, arbitrary arrest and detention, legal action, any form of surveillance, death threats, raids, break in, theft, smear campaigns, doxing, physical attacks, and many, many more. Now we want to take it a little bit further and look into the regional threat patterns. Regional patterns reveal important variations in threat profiles. North America shows sophisticated surveillance operations against environmental and indigenous defenders, with particular targeting of pipeline protesters and indigenous land rights defenders. In Canada, surveillance and infiltration tactics have been documented against First Nation communities opposing resource extraction projects, while the US continues to face criticism for the treatment of environmental activism as a potential terrorist threat under expanded anti terrorism legislation. Latin America remains the deadliest region with systemic targeting of environmental and indigenous rights defenders. Countries like Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico account for the majority of the killings, often involving complex networks of state and non state actors protecting extractive industry interests. Europe, on the other hand, faces an escalating crackdown in environmental activism, with authorities treating climate protest as a threat to the public order across Europe. France, Germany, and Italy have introduced punitive legislation, invoked criminal statuses intended for organized crime against nonviolent groups, and deployed invasive surveillance technologies against environmental activists. For example, also, Civicus Monitor downgraded Germany's civic space rating from open to narrowed in 2023 due to the increased repression against climate protesters. The Swana region shows high levels of digital targeting, particularly of LGBTQIA activists and women's defenders, combined with legal persecution through anti terrorism and cybercrime laws. The use of sophisticated spyware like Pegasus has been documented across multiple countries in the region. Sub Saharan Africa experiences significant state repression combined with community level violence, particularly affecting defenders working on extractive industries, land rights, and governance issues. The security situation in countries like DRC, Uganda, and Sudan creates extreme vulnerabilities for local defenders. Asia demonstrates increasing use of surveillance technologies combined with legal restrictions on civil society, with particular targeting of defenders working on minority rights, environmental issues, and democratic governance. And lastly, Oceania and Australia experience criminalization of climate protests through new anti protest laws that increase penalties for major economic disruption for up to $14,300 or 2 years in jail. Despite judicial support for protesters, governments across Australia are pushing for stringent anti protest laws, with some jurisdictions seeing 20% of climate and environmental protests involve arrests. In occupied territories such as Palestine, West Sahara, and West Papua, and many more, activists working against this occupation and settler colonialism are under continuous threat of extreme forms of violence. So now that we've spoken a lot about why we need holistic safety and security, let's talk about what it actually is. Holistic security is an integrated approach to protecting individuals, communities, and organizations by considering the interconnectedness of physical, digital, and psychosocial dimensions of safety. It goes beyond immediate threats to include sustainability, well being, and the agency of those affected. Very often, we think about security in rather narrow terms, such as protecting ourselves from violent physical attacks. But threats may also include structural forms of violence and harassment. Just to name a few examples, there is economic and other types of marginalization. Some people have extremely heavy workloads. We have a lack of financial security. And then, of course, also stress and traumatic experiences among a host of other factors. Such threats not only affect us, but also have implications for the people around us, including our friends and family. A holistic approach to security understands self care not as selfishness, but as a political act of self preservation. How we define our well being in the context of activism is subjective and deeply personal. It is influenced by the differing needs of our bodies and minds, the challenges we face, our beliefs, our gender identities, interests, and relationships around us. As activists and human rights defenders, we must define security for ourselves and build solidarity and support for one another into our groups, organizations, and movements on an ongoing basis. Here we would like to share our favorite quote by Audre Lorde. Caring for myself is not an indulgence, it is self preservation, and that is an act of political warfare.
When we talk about our safety and security as activists, we have to remember we're not starting from a blank slate. Our realities are shaped by histories of colonization, by the ways that racism, sexism, homophobia, or albiism show up in the laws and institutions around us. Even by how we're treated in public or online, for some of us, the very act of being visible and vocal is considered dangerous. Because many of us are impacted unequally, sometimes simply because of who we are. Security becomes a very personal subject. For example, a queer activist in Tunisia might not just worry about state repression, but also about undergoing coercive annual examinations, being outed to their own family, which could lead to violence at home and even exile. An indigenous environmental defender in Brazil faces threats from powerful corporations, but also from the police and paramilitary groups, sometimes just for defending their land. A woman activist in Egypt may risk arrest, not just for protesting, but for posting something quote unquote provocative on social media, with threats often laced with misogyny. That is why security isn't just a technical checklist. Install this app, use this password, tick these boxes, and you're safe. No, reality is a messier thing. Safety for activists means thinking about both the systems staked against us and the unique ways our identities put us at risk or sometimes shield us. For those most at risk, small actions like setting up Signal, not sharing location tagged photos, or having a trusted person know your whereabouts can mean everything. It is important we create safety nets that fit our real lives, not imagined perfect scenarios. That is why we need to equip ourselves and each other not only with technical tools, but with collective practices, staying in touch regularly, having emergency contacts, or even just being the friend who always checks if someone got home safe after a protest. The risks we weave through every day are not always under our control. Some days the greatest danger is a random police stop. Other times it's a data leak or a smear campaign online. But there are many risks we can reduce. When a journalist in Sudan encrypts her files, she may keep a whole community off government radar. Above all, we need to move away from what's sometimes called Oppression Olympics, comparing who has it the hardest. Our focus should be on seeing how our struggles connect and standing up for each other so no one gets left behind. No movement can truly win if some of us are still unsafe. So, as we talk about risks, let's remember ask what unique challenges each person brings and learn from them. Ask yourself, do I have a reliable support network? Am I treated by police the same way my ex friend is treated? Do I have a passport from the place where I was born? Do I have to worry about my family's safety due to my activism? let's also remember that we need to be the ally we want to have and support one another, not only with apps and advice, but with care and trust, as well as checking in. We need also to celebrate our resilience in the face of these enormous pressures and recognize that every small act of care and caution makes us stronger together. Because when one of us is safer, all of us are. As we deepen our understanding of security, it's vital to remember that real lasting safety isn't just about any single part of our lives or activism. Holistic security means protecting our lives, ourselves, our communities across different areas, recognizing that every aspect is connected. Let's walk through these components together. First, physical security. This is what most people think of: protection from direct bodily harm, surveillance, or physical intrusions. It includes things like being aware of your surroundings, having secure meeting places, and making plans to travel safely, especially when risks are high. Next, digital security. In this era, our phones and laptops are not just tools, they can also be sources of vulnerability. This involves making sure our devices, accounts, and communications are as secure as possible. Using strong passwords, for instance, encryption, practicing safe online behaviors, and being mindful of digital surveillance and hacking threats. Then we have psychological security or well being. This is about our mental and emotional health. Activism can be exhausting and traumatic. Managing stress, preventing burnout, and having spaces for healing and support are all essential for our long term effectiveness and our personal well being. Political and legal security is also understanding the environment we are operating in, the laws and policies that might protect us or put us at risk. For instance, knowing our rights during a protest, having access to legal counsel, and paying attention to changing political climate all fall here. Finally, there's the matter of the narrative. Our ability to tell and control our own stories about ourselves, our movements, and our goals is key. The narrative we put forward shapes public perception, builds resilience in our communities, and can even influence the risks we face when we own our stories instead of letting others define them. We build both power and safety. When we ask ourselves why holistic security is so important, it's because the challenges we face as social justice activists are never isolated or simple. The threats coming our way, whether from the state, corporations, or even within our communities, are often targeted, coordinated, and meant to intimidate us on multiple fronts. If we only focus on one aspect of safety, for example, locking down our social media or being careful at marshes, we remain exposed in other ways. Someone might feel digitally secure but overlook the emotional toll of constant surveillance. Or we might organize legal support but forget our digital footprints can be traced and weaponized at any time. A holistic approach is about seeing protection as an ecosystem, recognizing that our minds, bodies, data, networks, and even the stories we share are all connected. It allows us to anticipate risks, care for one another in a bigger circle, and move from a place of fear to one of collective empowerment. Because when all parts of our security are working together, we're stronger, more resilient, and better equipped to keep our movements alive, even when the pressure is high. So, holistic security is not just about strategy, it's a foundation for our liberation and our ability to keep showing up for justice day after day. Because his holistic lens supports resilience and long term sustainability, enables community based responses, reduces burnouts and trauma, strengthens solidarity and collective power, and it helps shift from reactive to proactive security.
Over the course of this training, we will encounter certain terminology frequently. In order to foster a common understanding, here are some of the key terminologies and concepts we need when speaking about holistic security. A threat is a potential source of harm or adverse action such as surveillance, physical violence, or legal repression posed by state or non state actors. Vulnerability refers to an inherent weakness or a gap in security, technical, operational, or social, that can be exploited by threats. For example, unencrypted communication, predictable routines, or insufficient legal support. A risk is the calculated likelihood and potential severity of a threat successfully exploiting a vulnerability, resulting in compromise or harm to individuals, operations, or movements. Resilience is the capacity of individuals, communities, or organizations to withstand, adapt to, and recover from stressors, attacks, or systemic oppression, maintaining continuity of purpose and function in the face of adversity. Mitigations are intentional actions and strategies implemented to reduce, manage, or eliminate identified risks, thereby limiting the likelihood or impact of a threat materializing. When we speak about safety and security, it's also important to understand the cycle of security. First of all, what we continue to do is to assess risk to kind of understand what is going to happen and monitor the context that we're in. This helps us to prepare for different types of situations. So we can improve our practices to reduce risks, to reduce the likelihood of something happening or the impact that it would have on us. And we know what to do if an incident happens. Then we have the cycle turning to the response. So that means we're managing the incidents when they happen and we get the support that is needed. So if we prepared well, the managing of the incidents is hopefully without much of a problem. So after we responded to something, we hopefully have time for adaptation where we kind of can go through everything to see what changes we need to make, if there's any mitigation that we can implement for the future. And that leads us back to understanding the risks that we're facing and to look at the context again that might have changed after something happens. And this brings us to the full security circle. In order to understand our personal sense of security and be able to develop strategies on how to analyze a threat and find ways to mitigate it, it is essential to explore how we actually perceive risks. While many of the fears we have are genuine, recognized threats, past traumatic events might shift our field of perception and we might begin to perceive unfounded fears as actual threats to our health and well being. On the other hand, being continuously in a higher risk environment might lead us to not be able to perceive all the threats, which leads us to unrecognized threats. It's important to understand that our field of perception is not static, it's moving based on our context and our past experiences. Especially stress, trauma, and fatigue can have an impact on our perception. When taking holistic security into consideration, it supports us in staying more grounded and able to analyze situations from different angles, which allows us to make informed decisions. This leads us to the last section of today, which is smart risk taking. As you can see in the graph, there's a red area in the upper right corner. This is the area that we want to avoid. So, smart risk taking and holistic safety and security can help us to avoid unnecessary risks or learn how to reduce or mitigate unavoidable risks. This is usually done through a risk assessment, which is based on likelihood and consequences, and a topic that we will discuss in further sessions. Thank you for being here with us today, and tune in for the next session on digital security.
Before we close today's session, I want to remind you that you're not alone in this work. Protecting ourselves and our communities can feel overwhelming, but there are resources and people ready to support you. If you are a climate justice activist or any human rights defender and find yourself in urgent need of help, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can contact us directly through the email, Signal, or WhatsApp numbers displayed on this slide. Even if we might not be able to provide direct assistance, we can refer you to our trusted partners and networks who specialize in different kinds of support, whether it's legal aid, digital security help, psychosocial care, or emergency relocation. Your safety and well being matter deeply, so please bookmark these contacts and share them with your peers in need. Activism is a journey we take together. So remember, reaching out is a sign of strength.